Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Friday. Nice to see you. Glad to have you on our final call of the week for the first week of June. As we originally started doing with these calls, I'll just start right off the top with our update on rent forbearance numbers. In the residential part of the portfolio, we've got pretty much the same group. We have a few tenants who have begun receiving benefits, and they have actually taken themselves off the list and resumed paying their rent. We haven't gotten to trying to have a discussion about what we're going to do about the past due rent. But we also have only one or two new people. So we are holding steady at, I think it's just over 30 people who are asking for forbearance, or who have asked in the past. We're working with our commercial tenants. It looks to me like, the way that this may very well be going is a 50-50 split for a lot of tenants. As I think I discussed on Wednesday, a lot of people who have leases with 5 years or less remaining on the term. Owners are looking at the leases and evaluating their rent increase provisions and deciding maybe they want to, delay 4 or 5 months worth of rent from this year and put it at the end of the lease. It has value there. If you got 3% increases, for example, you'll be essentially getting 3% interest, assuming that the tenant is able to reopen. For a tenant that is possibly, likely to reopen reasonably soon, you may very well want to do something like that. A lot of the other tenants, bars, restaurants, personal services and things, we're basically just looking at 50-50, splitting the rent with them for the rest of the year just to keep them going. And that seems to be the sort of fair perspective these days, of let's just share the pain. Most of my property owner clients have been willing to make a deal like that, and the tenants appreciate it. And we're not making any commitments past the end of this year because I want to see what happens in the next 4 or 5 months before we start talking about, making big changes to the already established, rent structure and obligations of these commercial leases. So for now, we are doing our best to spread the pain evenly and help, everybody that we can, and to be as kind and generous as possible while still operating a business. So, at this point, we are encouraging all of our clients to, be realistic. Everybody's been very kind. And so that's where we're at. Nothing new specifically to report. Next week, we will have pretty much a good wrap on what we're expecting for June. Middle of the week will be around the 10th. So we will have a good picture of what to expect for June. The rate of increase has not been so far, has not seemed as bad as we thought it would be. And we're happy to be able to keep everybody in place. This past week, we spent some time on Wednesday, actually, while I was doing this call. The office was closed. I sent everybody home and we boarded it up because we got some, rumors on the street and information even from the police department was that the big protest at Mission Dolores High School that was going to march to the police station at 17th and Valencia could have splinter groups that were going to vandalize Noe Valley and could affect my office. The conversation that I had with my staff when I went to the office and sat down with them and said, look, we have to do this right now. I want to protect the office, but I also, I had to explain to everybody that, your role as property management professionals is really to help all of the tenants to shelter in place, to keep everybody as a part of the overall effort safe in their homes. We want to be able to provide the maintenance services. We want to be able to take care of the people living in their buildings. And, it helps to give a little bit bigger perspective on where we're at and why what we're doing is important. So we talked a little bit about that. And so that's the perspective we're trying to keep as we go on. I hope that that everybody who has had significant job losses has been able to find ways to keep themselves solvent and not have to spend everything they ever saved to try to keep going through this time. And we're just doing our best to keep everybody going in the right direction. So, you know, the next thing, I'm going to throw this to Denise and have her give us a little bit of an update on where we're at with the moratorium on evictions, and also the update. We were supposed to have the hearing at the Land Use Committee for the Preston moratorium or permanent ban on evictions for any non-payment of rent during the COVID crisis as related to the COVID-related job losses. That was going to be on Monday, and the city was unable to have both hearings for two different committees simultaneously. And so they postponed this one, and it's coming back up again on Monday, the 8th. So we will have another opportunity if you want to discuss it, but I will throw this to Denise, and then we will also have an update. Josh has a new topic to discuss related to sales, and I will have him right after Denise. So Denise, with that, I will introduce you. Let's hear what's going on. Hold on, let's get you unmuted. Oh, unmute. Come on, computer. I am pressing unmute. All right, well, unmute. Here we go. Denise?
JJ?
There you are. Okay.
There I am. Okay. Unfortunately, I heard that there's consideration currently to extend the moratorium through July 31st. And we will have confirmation of that hopefully on Monday. I do know that Tenant Bar is meeting, they started their meeting at 1:30. And this is when I say the Tenant Bar is primarily Carrie Gold, who is in charge of the eviction defense in San Francisco County on behalf of the city and county. And she is sort of the main go-to with respect to which nonprofit gets the representation of the tenants on the city dime. So they're having a big meeting right now to determine what is going to happen, but it's possible that the mayor will extend the moratorium through July. Unfortunately, I won't know anything until Monday. So that's that situation, which means that we will then, as I'm sure many of you may know, there is a letter from Zach's office on behalf of various property interest groups, property rights groups, i.e. landlords, property owners, larger, big corporate owners, suggesting that Dean Preston's legislation is a violation of the law, and should they proceed forward, there will be a lawsuit filed. And that hearing on whether or not it's even going to go to committee happens on Monday. And it's also my understanding from Andrew's office and from other people that I've spoken to that Andrew's working with, that there are more than 500, between 500 and 800 people currently signed up to speak as owners in San Francisco County with respect to their absolute abhorrence and suggestion that the city and county not proceed and pass the legislation because it would just completely undermine the health of the landlords, so many landlords who are actually housing these folks. So it's a two-shot deal going on right now. They're trying to pass another moratorium. They're trying to pass the legislation forever forgiving the rent during COVID. And yet at the same time, we are also going to be fighting should that legislation pass.
Is a letter like that ever actually a deterrent? Do they really even care if there would be a lawsuit? I mean, they don't have to fight it with their own dollars.
That's right. So interestingly, if you speak to the city attorneys, the deputy city attorneys who are assigned to the cases, they completely understand our position, but they work for the city and they're working for the public good. And so irrespective of the understanding by city attorneys, the deputy city attorneys saying, oh yeah, you know what, you're right. They still have to defend the action by the city.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, they have many hundreds, they have hundreds of attorneys with the city attorney's office. Right. And it's a political office, so.
Right, but it never stops the politicians from doing anything because there's a threat of a lawsuit. Bert, did you have a question? Bert, I've got everybody off mute, and I can't hear you though. Are you there?
Okay, here I am, yeah.
There you are.
Mayor agreed has to make a major cut in the budget this year, and I think it's 1.5 billion next year.
Mhm.
And the city attorney is paid out of that.
Mhm.
So I think the point could be made that we need to, it should be effective for that reason, that we not do any kind of legal things that aren't really necessary.
Well, Dennis Herrera is pretty powerful. And so, unfortunately, that's the situation there. He too is a political animal. And interestingly, there's no line item budgeting. So it's either all or nothing for the city budget. They cannot line item different results. So if she wants the money, or if she doesn't want the money, or if the budget is going to be less than last year's, everybody will take a hit probably across the board. It's not 20% for that department and 10% for the other one. It will be across the board cuts.
So what is the situation with the Judicial Council and their decision of when to reopen the courts?
Well, it's 60 days post moratorium.
Right.
Currently, it's 90 days from when Judge Newsom originally identified when we would be open. And so we're still looking at June and July, depending upon if it's commercial or residential.
Okay.
But if it's extended, we don't know whether Mayor Newsom will give a nod to the city and county, because he's not stepping on the toes of the individual counties. So if San Francisco County extends again, he is going to probably allow that extension to occur in San Francisco County. So we may not get summons issued by city and county of San Francisco for UDs. But that doesn't stop us from proceeding with ejectment actions, for example, or other lawsuits, breach of contract actions. So depending upon the situation with the lease, you may want to bring I have a couple of breach of contract actions going, because I have people who are saying that they're not going to pay, but they're term lease. So I do have the ability to bring a breach of contract versus a month-to-month agreement. That's the difference.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have questions about the legal aspects? I'm going to send out either later this afternoon or Monday morning the full, all the information about how to call in for our the hearing at the Land Use Committee on the moratorium. So stay tuned for that. I'll send it out right away, so everybody has access to that information and can call in to give their testimony about how it would negatively affect you and your family if you were unable to even make a little bit of a deal with your tenant to get something back over even an extended period of time for unpaid rent due to the virus. So with that, I'll also now thank you, Denise, for being with us and for giving us the update as dark and
Yes.
difficult and dismal as it is.
Yes.
And now I'll introduce Josh to give us the news from the sales front. Josh, what is going on with you?
Just a quick question for you before I jump into that.
Sure.
On commercial leases, you were saying 50%. It looks like the path is towards 50% reduction for the rest of the year,
Right.
and then the 100% that a tenant hasn't paid gets added onto the lease.
If you've got 5 years or less, a lot of landlords are saying, "Well, gee, I can handle that. I can delay the unpaid rent March, April, May, even June for like 4 months. I can tolerate waiting until the end of the lease. If I've got a few tenants who
to get that back in full.
Correct.
Okay.
And in full with increases, because obviously if you've got 3% increases for 4 years, you're going to get, I've got one tenant who's, going to be paying 12% more, 12% plus compounding more in 4 years, but they're looking at it and going, I was going to pay 12 months of at that rent in 4 years. I might as well pay 16 and get zero rent now when I need it most. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then after that period, 50% for the rest of the year, just because business is going to be bad.
Business is going to be bad, and we want to prioritize the remainder of the value of that lease as best we can.
So on the sales front, I just want to 2.5 million jobs added in May. It was a good sign. Just a quick mention of that. That should help the market. They're expecting much greater losses for May. On another point, I'm starting to kind of just pivot towards looking at buying opportunities in the market. Nobody has necessarily expressed directly to me on this call, hey, I want to buy another property, but I want to start, I'm going to pay more attention now to opportunities and to look at it as a reflection of the market in general. So any kind of buy opportunities you can think in also in terms of the value of your own property, if prices are going down and why. So next week I'll have on Wednesday I'll start to present like 1 or 2 properties. I won't go into outrageous detail, but it'll just be a nice snapshot of kind of what's going on and my thoughts about some opportunities on the horizon. Obviously in investing, you know, the adage of when everybody else is fleeing, you should probably go in. I'm not sitting here recommending that people buy investment properties right away, right now. It all depends on the deal. But I do think there's going to be some unique opportunities here. This is a very rare occurrence that we're in right now. Lending is going to be an issue. It'll be interesting to see where they're at. I've talked to a few lenders and on the more private equity side, and they're slow to get back in, but they're just worried about the uncertainty. But I do think there's going to be some nice opportunities coming up. So just to let you know where I'm kind of going to be moving towards, a little bit more of a kind of an optimistic way to take advantage of this market in some ways, and I'll be doing that next week.
Great. Well, that sounds good. Okay. Well, let's see what, if that's all, I'll certainly have much more information to share with you next week when we get to the rents, though it seems like maybe we're hitting a plateau with rent forbearance as well as with cases, though I hope that the protests that we just went through this week don't turn into super spreader events that make the caseloads go through the roof. But you know, we'll see what happens. As an aside, we had a very interesting conversation with the administration of my daughter's school. She'll be starting kindergarten in the fall, and wow. They were talking about what life is going to be like, and they're going to do 1 3-week session of summer camp. I put her in for an entire summer of summer camp. I'm going to get a month of distance learning and 3 weeks in July, but they're going to have 12 kids, and it's going to be the same 12 kids and the same staff. And they even said attendance is mandatory, and if you miss a day, you can't come back because they don't know where you've been, and they want to make sure that all you're doing is sheltering in place or coming to day camp, which is kind of a frightening concept to think that, you know, I mean, obviously parents aren't going to take their kids out of day camp because they are going somewhere fun, but just the whole way that life is changing, and they were talking about using multiple entrances at the school to monitor the people who are coming and going, and no parents on campus at all, and it's going to be a new world. So,
JJ, what school is it?
It's Presidio Knowles School. It's south of Market at 10th and Howard.
Uh-huh.
It's a brand new campus that they just finished building a year ago, and they have multiple different entrances so that they can have, you know, maybe 3 grades go into each entrance separately, so they know who's coming and going a little bit better and have control over the entrances and the exits. Oh, and then if they have a confirmed case, they have to immediately close the school for 5 days and do distance learning again. So we're going to be shifting back and forth. I would imagine it's going to be all school year, shifting back and forth between, you know, unforeseen shelter in place again with school. And, you know, having to deal with that is going to be interesting. And, you know, that's what everybody in San Francisco is contending with, everybody with kids and all of our tenants and everything. So we're going to be going back and forth. People thought about shelter in place as, oh my God, they're locking it down. They're going to open it back up, and then we're going to, go back to normal. It's going to be, they're going to open it up. They're going to pull it back. They're going to open it up. They're going to pull it back. We're going to get all the way opened up, and then we're going to go all the way back again. And we're just going to get good at the protocols for a year or a year and a half. It's crazy what this is going to mean for the way we live our lives on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Bert?
It is.
Oh. Let's see.
Okay.
There you are.
Here I am. Aren't they my next door neighbors?
Who? Oh, yes.
Howard Street.
The school is your next door neighbor. Yes. That was a funny thing I didn't think of when I went for the school tour, and I looked over the fence and I went, I know that building. That's Bert's building. Oh, that's the other side of the fence that I see from the end of Bert's alley. How about that? They are your next door neighbors. I hope they're good neighbors. They seem to be.
I love the sound of kids there.
Yeah.
It just really makes a big difference. Yeah. Much better than when the tax squad was there.
That's true. Yeah, no, and I have Horace Mann Buena Vista Middle School is my next door neighbor, and I'm looking at their schoolyard, and it's been sad to see an empty schoolyard with no sound of kids, out my back window, and they haven't turned off the bells, so the bell still goes off at like 8:30 in the morning, and I hear it and I go, "Yep, bell's ringing for no one. It's too bad." Ask not for whom the bell tolls. Tolls for no one.
Very good one.
There's nobody there. Anyhow, well, with that, I will wish you all a wonderful weekend. Try to get out and do something fun, and I'll do the same, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, JJ.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
guys.
Denise.